Out of all the media I've consumed, Power Rangers is one that has had the most impact on me. Without it, I doubt Guyver, with its tokusatsu aesthetic, would have attracted me to it. Ron Wasserman, who was the composer for the show for many years, introduced me to the style of music that I'd learned to absolutely love. The Zord fights made Godzilla and Gamera so much more appealing as well. But perhaps most importantly, it gave us a gold standard for a franchise rep. Someone who loved the fans as much as we loved him. Jason David Frank is what anyone trying to represent a franchise should be. Someone who genuinely loved the product he was a part of and never went out of his way to belittle the fans like so many people involved with many franchises these days. Which makes it all the more saddening to know that he's no longer with us. However, let's not dwell on the sadness. Today we look at a character that Jason happily portrayed for 25 years and see just how good his most important stories were. Our introduction starts with Jason getting ready for a match named Martial Arts Tournament, and he's facing none other than our man of the hour, Tommy Oliver. And this scene is actually very good. It establishes Tommy is on par with Jason in terms of fighting prowess, and plants the seeds for the long-running romance with Kim. The only thing really wrong about it is the segment with Rita. Now, her keeping tabs on the Rangers and immediately nominating Tommy for the Green Ranger position based on his skills is a good thing. But if she's had the green power coin this whole time, then why not give it to Goldar? At this point in the series, he was nothing but loyal to Rita, and him cucking for people more powerful than his last boss wasn't established until Lord Zed shows up in Season 2. At the very least, it should be mentioned why she's been sitting on the Green Ranger powers for this long. Tommy is heading home after school when he's ambushed by putties. He manages to fight them off effectively, and it's revealed that he's being tested by Rita, which, once again, is very good. While Tommy looked impressive at the tournament, that's a different deal than fighting for your life. He showed that not only could he beat the putties, but that he can think on his feet pretty effectively. He's then taken and brainwashed before given the power coin. Now comes the part that isn't so great. Tommy teleports into the command center right when Zordon goes into a meditative state and Alpha shuts down to recharge. That's immensely convenient that both of them are basically asleep at the exact time that Tommy was brainwashed and sent to mess up Alpha and the command center. Zordon then wakes up, I guess. I suppose that Alpha yelling for him to help would work, but it's revealed that Zordon knows Rita had the green power coin this entire time. Keep this in mind, I'm not done with it yet. Tommy destroys the command center control panels, causing Zordon to static out of their dimension. Ignoring the contrivance, this is immensely effective at establishing Tommy as a threat. He has done more damage to the Rangers in 11 minutes than any of the monsters prior to this point. I'm just wondering why it took Rita 20 episodes to do this, but better late than never, I suppose. The Rangers get a distressing call from Alpha, but due to the damage caused by Tommy, they can't teleport. Luckily, they have the Rad Bug, a flying car Billy built in a previous episode that they forgot about in later seasons despite being very useful. They arrive at the command center and Billy takes out the virus disk Tommy put in Alpha earlier.
Broke into the command center.
But who? No one has access to this place without a power coin. Look at—
Excellent question, Trini. It's a shame Zordon didn't tell you guys about this possibility. This is a consistent issue with Zordon. He just knows a bunch of really important shit and doesn't tell the Rangers until the plot needs them to know. However, we are not here to go on autistic diatribes about how shit Zordon is at his job. That's an entire video on its own. The Rangers see a giant-sized Goldar in the viewing globe, which still works after all the controls were destroyed. How convenient. They morph, and instead of taking on the greater threat of Goldar, they just take on a bunch of putties. Why didn't you go straight for your Zords? They take on the putties, and then summon their Zords, which is really stupid. After the Megazord and Goldar fight for a bit, Goldar vanishes and Tommy jumps into the Megazord and punches the air so hard it makes the console explode. That's pretty cool, but I'm not sure why you needed to do all this shit with Goldar. Wouldn't luring them out with the putties be sufficient enough? Tommy then rips through the Rangers like nothing. I mean, he humiliates them. Then the scene just ends and the Rangers just teleport back to the command center. It feels like there's a scene missing because how it's presented makes it look like Tommy just gave up trying to fight them because we just stop on him taking a pose and then cut to the Rangers teleporting. Very odd. Alpha is still feeling the effects of the virus, so he shuts down, which is a very nice detail. The damage wouldn't just go away the second the virus was removed. The Rangers then look at the viewing globe to see Tommy laughing evilly, and the episode ends. Because this, my friends, is a 5-parter, and what a great way to start. Let's see if we can keep the quality going. Episode 2 starts with the Rangers still reeling from getting their asses kicked. However, Billy does manage to get Alpha up and running again. Cut to Rita, and she wants to give Tommy the Sword of Darkness. Not sure why he didn't do that off the bat, but sure. However, that's not the issue here.
If you give it to Green Ranger, it has the power to keep him under your spell forever, as long as no one destroys him.
That seems like an awful design flaw. It also doesn't even make any sense. Tommy has already brainwashed through a spell Rita cast last episode unrelated to the sword. So basically, by having the sword, the spell Rita cast will then link to it like some kind of weird facehugger, completely dependent on the sword not being destroyed. Compounding this even more is the fact that Zordon knows about this flaw, which doesn't even make sense with the sword's backstory given literally a few seconds earlier.
Your evil knight defeated Zordon's soldiers thousands of years ago, taken from him and presented to you as a prize.
How the fuck is a sword unrelated to Rita even supposed to work as explained? Tommy is teleported back to the alley he was taken from when Bulk and Skull arrive, and Bulk wants an apology for what happened in the last episode. And then this happens. We were doing so good. Tommy, Rita told you to keep your identity a secret.
Remember to keep your identity as the Green Ranger a secret. No.
Even if it doesn't prove you're the Green Ranger to Bulk and Skull, you realize that they will probably inform people that you did this, and the Rangers would eventually pick up on it and logically deduce that you are the Green Ranger or under Rita's influence. Because remember, giant monster attacks are the norm in Angel Grove, so shit like this shouldn't be too out of the ordinary. Not only would it just be the better writing choice, but just imagine how unsettling it would be if Tommy not only apologized, but did so in his usual tone, even sounding genuine.
What is with that guy?
I don't know, but he should have his eyes checked.
Oh, Bulk and Skull are just retarded. That explains nothing, actually. Yes, they're not very smart, but again, giant monster attacks are a common occurrence, for fuck's sake. Jason is taking out his frustrations as he and Zach actually put the pieces together of what happened at the command center.
He wears a costume like ours. But Zordon never mentioned anything about a Green Ranger.
You think he's the one that totaled the command center?
Too much of a coincidence. I mean, he shows up, and then Zordon suddenly missing.
Now this is certainly some good stuff. It shows that the characters are smart. However, this detail right here is what surprised me. Jason stops Zach from responding to him as soon as someone walks by. Both then look around to see if any more people are heading their way before going back to talking. This attention to detail is something you don't really associate with Power Rangers, at least not in this era. They are talking about their lives as Rangers, which is supposed to be a secret. So obviously they would do something like this. But why would they talk about it in public in the first place? Well, that is informed by how it started. Jason, as mentioned earlier, is taking out his frustrations in the most masculine way possible by punching something. It's a great example of letting a character's emotions get the better of them in a way that makes sense. It's important to note that the Rangers have never been so thoroughly humiliated and outplayed before. They've had issues fighting monsters, sure, but it was nothing like what Tommy did to them, which would make someone like Jason very angry.
All I know for sure is that I'd like to get my hands on this guy.
All of these small things add up into what is a very good scene. Back at the command center, as Billy has been hard at work fixing the place up, but he hasn't been able to contact Zordon yet. So at least a sense of progress is being established, instead of just sitting around doing fuck all. Kim spots Tommy in the halls and goes up to him. And here we get something that I really don't understand about kids shows. You see, the way Tommy talks after being brainwashed is completely different than he does both before and after. Do you think the kids will be confused? Because I'm pretty sure they wouldn't, considering they saw him being kidnapped and brainwashed. If anything, it causes a disconnect because the Rangers don't pick up on this at all. It's done solely for the audience. Cut to Rita's palace, and Goldar suggests that Tommy should have to earn the Sword of Darkness, which I simply scratch my head at. He's done more damage to the Rangers than any of the monsters Rita has sent previously. I would imagine that would be enough. That's not the dumbest part, however. Goldar suggests that Tommy should have to fight putties, those things he already proved himself superior to before Rita kidnapped him. How is this going to prove anything that you don't already know? So obviously, Tommy passes the test and gets the Sword of Darkness. Tommy then teleports Jason to another dimension where Goldar has somehow taken Jason's morpher. Not sure how he got it, especially since Goldar wasn't in the room when Jason arrived. Jason starts fighting Goldar, but it goes about as well as you'd expect. Meanwhile, the others go to confront Tommy, and they too get tossed around. It's so bad that they have to summon the Megazord in order to actually get some kind of victory over Tommy as he's forced to retreat. I thought the Rangers weren't supposed to escalate a fight. Or is the implication that Tommy is just that strong? Regardless, the fact that they had to summon the Megazord just to push him back keeps up the fact that Tommy is just that dangerous. Things with Jason, however, aren't going as smoothly. Goldar toys with him some more by dropping the morpher on the ground. Jason tries to go for it, but Goldar stops him. The episode ends with Jason on the ground, helpless and unable to do anything. Jason manages to dodge Goldar's attack and uses the smoke on the ground to his advantage as he hides. That's actually really cool. You'd imagine that a 90s kids show would simply forget that that is a possibility. And it at least looks like there'd be enough to hide him. Back with Rita, and she decides to call upon her old friend Scorpina. Why you didn't do this before is beyond me, seeing how she fills a similar spot to Goldar, but we have Sentai footage to use. The Rangers decide to look for Jason before we cut back to him and Goldar to see a surprisingly tense scene with Goldar stabbing the ground and even coming close to getting Jason. Of course, he can't lie on the ground forever, so he catches Goldar by surprise. Obviously, this was a lucky hit as Goldar goes right back to mopping the floor with Jason, but it's impressive nonetheless. We cut to Kim looking for Jason as she runs back into Tommy, who is still acting like a complete asshole.
And let me guess, you're worried, right?
Kim tells Zach that Tommy said that Jason never showed up when they were supposed to work out. However, Zach says this.
It's bogus. I know Jason was there.
This doesn't make any sense considering Jason was kidnapped before school ended. So how could you have known that he was at the community center? Or does there simply mean that he was at school in general, because that would make even less sense? Regardless, they go after Tommy, but Rita sends putties to distract them after Goldar informs her that they suspect something. How does Goldar not only know that Kim suspects anything when he has no reason to, but how is he even there when he's busy trying to kill Jason? This prevents Kim and Zach from gaining any information from Tommy that might lead them to suspect something from him. You know, we can have a fight scene while things make sense, right? Why not have Rita looking through her telescope at the start to see them following Tommy? It would show Rita being smart as she's monitoring the Rangers' every move. Back with Goldar and Jason, as Goldar is about to kill Jason, but Tommy teleports in and tells Goldar that Rita wants him to kill Jason. Seems a bit convoluted to get a fight between Tommy and Jason. Why not just have it be this from the start? You can still do all the things Goldar did, but with Tommy. Billy finally manages to get the communicators working again so they can get Jason's location. Speaking of Jason, he's getting his ass handed to him.
Soon, you and your friends will be a memory.
Tommy manages to stop Jason from using his morpher when we cut to Rita and the gang remembering what Scorpina can do, and I have to ask, Perhaps this scene should have been somewhere else as it's cutting into important stuff. And it's not like they go down a list of impressive things to build her up, it's a pointless scene that borks the pacing. The Rangers finally then lock onto Jason and teleport him. One detail that most media these days would likely forget is that Jason had a hold on his morpher when he teleported. So we're not left wondering why he has his morpher in later scenes, because even a 90s children's show understands basic fundamentals better than multi-million-dollar blockbusters. But what's even more surprising is that Goldar scolds Tommy for taking too long to kill Jason, and Tommy is punished for it. Which, yeah, that would be what would happen. Ruby just can't stop losing to a 30-year-old kid show. Magnificent. Jason fills the others in on what happened, and we have yet another continuity flub.
It all started at school.
At school? Tommy said you didn't show up.
No, Tommy said that he waited for Jason after school.
As a matter of fact, I waited for him after school, and he never showed.
This is important because it completely changes the context of the conversation. The Rangers are saying Tommy said Jason wasn't at school at all. Meanwhile, Tommy said he waited for Jason after school since they did have plans to work out together. He never once said that Jason never showed up to school at all, just that he never showed up for their after-school activity. Nothing about what Tommy said implies that Jason never showed up to school, period. The scene is trying to get across that Tommy's lie is falling apart. Meanwhile, he didn't lie about the thing the show is saying he lied about.
You are just comprised to fail, aren't you?
Scorpina begins attacking the city, so the Rangers go out and fight her until she just goes back to Rita's palace. Thanks for wasting mine and everyone else's time. Then Rita decides to send Goldar and fucking Christ make up your mind show. However, that's not the only issue here.
And I'll be busy working on a spell to cause an eclipse and cut off Megazord's solar power when the final battle begins.
Keep this in mind. I'm not done with it yet. The show does somewhat address the fact that Rita seems to have the worst case of ADHD.
Every time Rita attacks, she pulls back.
Almost as if she's holding back, getting ready for a bigger battle.
Now that doesn't really explain why she keeps pulling back when you'd think that she'd hold off until she thinks Tommy is ready again, but it's something, I guess. The Rangers managed to pick up Zordon, but there seemingly isn't enough power to keep him for very long. Our episode ends with Goldar attacking the city. The Rangers try and morph, but their morphers malfunction. This is due to the program trying to find Zordon causing a power surge, which means that all they can do is watch as Goldar destroys the city. That's not the worst way that the heroes are forced to do nothing I've seen. At least you can see the dots connect, a multi-dimensional scan putting strain on the computer systems that was hastily repaired. What I can't see any dots of is when Rita lays out her plan.
I'll cast a spell to eclipse the sun and cut off the source of Megazord's power.
Then why didn't you do it before, Rita? You seem to have known about Megazord's weakness all this time, yet you don't bother to do it prior to this point? It's frustrating because this isn't a terrible plan on its own, but fuck Rita is stupid for not even trying to do this before. Billy does some rewiring that manages to fix the issue. I would have thought that the wiring would have been correct the first time you fixed it, but sure. The Rangers then morph and head out to fight Goldar, but don't go out in their Zords, so they fight some putties instead. Goldar is the biggest threat here, so you'd think they'd try and take him out first, but I guess that idea is the biggest of gays. Bulk and Skull steal the youth center bus to try and get away faster. Pretty based, but Bulk and Skull are the definition of based, so not surprising. Tommy is freed from his timeout and comes back to the command center and disables Alpha. Back with the Rangers as Goldar grabs the bus with Bulk and Skull. Now, one could ask why they didn't just summon the Zords here, but you could infer that might make things worse, as Goldar could just yeet the bus across town, or the ensuing fight could destroy the bus. Instead, they teleport to the beach that Goldar was heading towards and see putties along with Squat and Babu about to tip the bus over. They do mention why they don't just jump up there to take care of things.
Got to get up there!
But if we make a move, they'll send it over for sure.
Plus, they're still giant-sized Goldar, so there's something to somewhat justify their lack of action. Even then, they ultimately decide to do something. Cut to the command center, and Alpha's backup system kicks on and traps Tommy in a force field. Probably could have punched Alpha into tiny bits given you had enough time, but you know what? It's not that bad. Makes sense why Alpha's backup systems weren't functioning before, since it was a virus corrupting him rather than just pulling out a chip or something. It is a bit convenient, though, that Alpha came back on right before Tommy was going to erase Zordon forever, but it's not a bad scene. The Rangers form the Megazord and save the bus from going over before it begins to fight Goldar while the eclipse starts. But I have a few choice words to say about Rita's plan, but not until a little later. I will say that the Megazord is immensely shit when it comes to being energy efficient. They drop to 50% only after a minute or so.
We're losing power fast! We're down to 50%!
Does it not have the ability to store solar energy? Seems terribly designed for defending the fucking planet. What happens if they have to fight at night? Alpha decides to run a scanning program to try and figure out who the Green Ranger is, which of course is very smart. You have him trapped, so why not try and find out who he is? After all, you can then plan around him accordingly. Unfortunately, Rita uses her magic to teleport him out of the command center, and Goldar somehow knows Tommy is trapped.
Use your spells to release him!
Don't know how, since he's been dealing with the Rangers this whole time, but fuck it. After Rita makes Tommy grow, the three villains wreck the Megazord so hard the individual Zords are buried underground. Never have the Rangers been so thoroughly defeated before this. It was, and still is, a huge deal. An iconic moment in the series that many seasons would replicate in some fashion, intentional or not. Which makes it all the more disappointing now that I have to rip it apart. It's time to talk about Rita's plan. Rita knowing about the Megazord's fatal weakness raises the very reasonable question of why didn't she implement this plan earlier? I can buy her knowing about it in the first place, given the long history she has with Zordon, but the fact that she waited this long to do it makes her look massively incompetent. Compounding this is the fact that she waited just as long to get Scorpina into her crew. She could have done this exact thing each time the Rangers summoned the Megazord, just subbing Tommy for the monster of the day. And she came up with the Eclipse spell in a few hours at most, so it's not like she needed a lot of time to do it. Which also implies Rita could possibly do anything she wants given she's moving the fucking moon without much effort. Especially given how soft magic is in this show. Basically, Rita's a fucking moron. The Rangers retreat to the command center, licking their wounds, and Kim isn't taking it well.
Zordon's gone, the Megazords have been destroyed, we're outmatched.
Jason, being the leader, does what he's supposed to do and rallies them to not give up.
Isn't the smallest chance of victory enough of a reason for us to keep on fighting? The world needs us, Rangers.
However, there's still doubt and frustration as expressed by Zack.
The Green Ranger was Rita's trump card. She played it. She won.
Now, this is relatively simple stuff, but it's still worth praising because it's what they would do. After getting thrashed multiple times, their Zord seemingly gone, and Zordon having a less than 10% chance of returning according to Billy.
What are the chances of bringing Zordon back online?
Less than 10%.
The situation is as fucked as it's ever been. Of course, some of them would feel like giving up. It's unfortunate that this era isn't remembered for moments like this, and only the nonsense. Alpha says that the scan on the Green Ranger is done, and our episode ends on the team finding out that the Green Ranger is Tommy. I would imagine that his voice would give it away since there was no effort to mask it, but whatever. On to the last episode. The Rangers are, of course, in disbelief, even bringing up how the computer was malfunctioning to try and possibly explain that it was a mistake.
There's gotta be a mistake.
Alpha, are you sure about this?
Yeah, but the computer's also been under repair.
But Billy states that it is indeed correct. It's also neat that they instantly go to Rita brainwashing Tommy. The best detail being that Alpha is the one to bring that up, since he's the one with the most experience with Rita next to Zordon. And because Tommy is doing evil things against his will, the Rangers want to save him. I understand this is basic level stuff, but you have to understand just how much popular media gets these basic things wrong. Simple, but relatively consistent characterization. Kim goes to the juice bar to look for Tommy, and we see Ernie watching Goldar destroy their city. I guess it's all the way across Angel Grove since the ground isn't shaking like last episode, but the weird part is he's doing it so casually.
You believe this is happening? Thank goodness for the Power Rangers.
The way he says it is like your dad watching clips from Hurricane Katrina while in fucking Ohio. There is a giant monster destroying your city and you should be very concerned about it. Kim confronts Tommy and he gives her a warning.
You should also know that you and the other Power Rangers will soon be destroyed.
I can't help but think this would have been better if Tommy was putting up a facade. And I mean acting like he normally does and not sounding evil. The contrast would be unsettling and honestly terrifying for a younger audience, especially with how intense JDF can look. It's not a bad scene, mind you, but the potential for a great scene was pretty much lost.
Quiet!
What if we can't
Silence!
Wait, weren't you destroying the city a few minutes ago? Or was that a newscast of earlier events? It's not really made all that clear. Rita then summons the coolest sword ever, and I will fight anyone. And I mean anyone who says otherwise. From its Godzilla-inspired design and entrance to its practical yet awesome weapons, the Megazord is the perfect combination of cool and sensible design. Its main form of melee attack is a tail, which is considerably long and has a drill at the end. The missile fingers may be a tad silly, but it offers a sensible way of having long-range weapons without having some bulky thing placed on it throwing off the design. It's so fucking cool! I'm sorry if I'm not being descriptive enough, but I can't help it. My inner child refuses to be unbound whenever this majestic machine is on screen. Unfortunately, I must also recognize the issues with this scene. If Rita could do this, then why not immediately give it to Tommy? It would have made things much easier if Tommy was giant-sized controlling the Megazord. All Rita needs to do is a bolt of magic to revitalize it. Come to think of it, is Rita controlling it in this scene? I would assume that Tommy is controlling the Megazord in the Rampage, as he's later seen with the Dragon Dagger in his hand, though we don't hear him playing the flute. If she is, then that opens up a bunch of holes that the current MCU would be impressed at. The Rangers morph to confront Tommy before he orders the Megazord to shoot them with his missiles, but the explosion is kinda pathetic and they all survive. Strange, but alright. I'm sure that'll remain consistent.
Damn continuity! Damn it to hell!
I'm destroying you! And I'm doing it because my Empress commands me to.
Alright, Tommy. Just command the Megazord to step on them or fire the missiles again. Or just have it flail around like an attention deficit gorilla. However, Alpha manages to finally get Zordon back. And with him back, the Rangers can now use their Zords again. I'm sorry, what? How are those things connected? The Rangers could use their Zords when Zordon was gone, so his presence isn't needed for them to function. But we need a Zord fight, so who cares if it makes sense? The Megazord is formed and it fights the Megazord and knocks Tommy out, where Jason fights him in a pretty good battle. Tommy is defeated and the Sword of Darkness is destroyed, freeing Tommy from Rita's mind control. It's like making the crux of your brainwashing connected to a fucking sword with a dumbass idea in the first place. Tommy, of course, feels awful about the things he's done, but the others understand he wasn't in control of his faculties. And with him on the team, they get a new Megazord configuration, which is the coolest Megazord of this era, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise. Our 5-parter finally ends as Tommy agrees to the 3 rules, and they have a corny but still heartwarming team cheer.
Power Rangers!
Green with Evil is one of the most influential stories in the franchise's history. New additions to the Rangers would become highly anticipated moments of the season. Mid-season status quo shakeups would become commonplace. We would even see the antagonist Ranger idea be done in multiple ways. It cannot be stressed enough just how much of an impact this multi-parter had to the series. which makes it all the harder to say that it's not very good. The plot is held together with silly putty and spit, and it obliterates many of the stakes of past episodes, and makes our main villain look like a complete idiot more often than not. First off, the fact that Rita waited this long to even consider the idea of using the Green Ranger coin if she's had it all this time is beyond moronic. At this point, she should know already just how powerful the Rangers are. The fact she didn't do this by episode 5 at the very latest makes no sense, as at that point it should have been very clear to her repeating the same plan over and over doesn't work. In fact, this should have been the very first thing she did. Give the power coin to Goldar and send him into the command center to blow it up from the inside. Zordon is dead, or at least unable to recruit Rangers, and the world is yours for the taking. Instead, she waits God knows how long before brainwashing someone. Sure, she chose someone that made sense to be her Green Ranger, but what was stopping her from just brainwashing any of the other Rangers? Rita can also create spells powerful enough to move the moon. Not only does that dwarf anything the Rangers can do, but it destroys the stakes of almost anything. She can create spells on this level in an afternoon. Imagine what else she could do. On top of that, why not lead with the Eclipse every time she makes a monster grow? Rita has presumably known about this weakness the whole time and doesn't even attempt to exploit it until now. Smaller but still notable issues being Bulk and Skull's retardation of Tommy's glowing eyes and not taking it seriously as they should, the Zords magically getting better, and of course, the ongoing issue of Zordon knowing everything but not telling the Rangers fuck all until it's too late. Connecting the powers to a fucking sword that could potentially be broken among various others. With that being said, despite all these flaws, I still absolutely love this multi-parter. For both nostalgic reasons and the moments you don't hear enough people talk about when it comes to this era. Plus, it's always cool to go back and see where certain trends in a franchise or genre started and how they evolved over the years.